Okay, so today we're going to go over the first part of the 10.4 notes. We're going to be graphing absolute values and parabolas. So we'll go over the parabola first. Parabolas have the equation in the form y equals x minus h squared plus k. Okay. H and k are numbers. Y and x stay in the equation. So for this, the h and k are actually part of the vertex. The vertex is the starting point. And it's going to be the values h comma k. So h is your x value, k is your y value. Okay. The axis of symmetry. This is where you could fold your graph in half and both pieces of the graph would lay on top of each other. This is going to be at x equals whatever your h value is. So your x value is what you use for your axis of symmetry. Now this graph has a U shape. So it's going to look like a U, either right side up for these purposes. Later on, it could be upside down. We'll go over that in this next set of notes. And the pattern you use to draw the rest of your points once you plot the vertex is 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay. So for the most basic graph, let's say the point 0, 0 is your vertex. Okay. The pattern 1, 3, 5, 7 means you'd go over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3, over 1, up 5. And you continue that pattern as far as you can go. Same the other way. So we do it on both sides of your vertex. Left 1, up 1, left 1, up 3, left 1, up 5. That makes a pretty little U. Now, the other type of graph we're looking at is absolute value. It's very similar. The difference between parabola and absolute value equations is parabola is squared. Absolute value has the absolute value signs, no squared. Okay. Your vertex is still at h comma k. Your axis of symmetry is still x equals h. Now the difference is your pattern is going to be 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so let's say we start at 0, 0 for our vertex. Your pattern is over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, and you just continue that as far as you can go. And we're going to do that on both sides. So now I'm going to go left 1, up 1, left 1, up 1, and continue the pattern. Okay, then we connect our dots and draw arrows at both ends because these graphs do continue on. Okay, so we're going to be using U shapes and V shapes today for parabolas and absolute value equations. So now we're going to practice graphing them. Okay, we're going to identify the vertex, the axis of symmetry. We're going to state whether the graph opens upward or downward, say whether the shape is U or V, give the pattern, and then graph it. So for this first problem, y equals x squared. Notice there's no h or k, but we could write this as x minus 0 squared plus 0, and it'd be the same thing. So your vertex is 0, 0. So whenever they don't give you an h or a k, that automatically means that value is going to be 0. Your axis of symmetry is an equation. It's going to be x equals the x value in our vertex, which is 0. Since this is a squared equation, it's a U shape, and that means our pattern is going to be 1, 3, 5, 7. So now I can graph it. I start at 0, 0, and I use my pattern. Over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3, over 1, up 5. And we do that on both sides of our vertex. Then I draw lines with arrows, and I'm done. Now notice that this graph, it opens up, okay? It's a right side up U. So that means when it says whether it graphs up or down, opens up or down, it opens up, okay? For this next one, x minus 5 squared, it is still squared, which means it's a parabola. So it's going to be a U shape. Our vertex, we are given an x value here. Now you need to keep in mind for your vertex, the x value is the opposite of whatever's here. So this is a minus 5, but we use a positive 5. Okay? And there's no y value, so it's 0. Our axis of symmetry is x equals. The x value of our vertex is 5. We already went over that it's a U, and since it's this parabola, our pattern's 1, 3, 5, 7. So for this one, I start at 5, 0. So I go right 5, put a dot there, And my pattern is the same. Over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3, over 1, up 5 on both sides. And draw my lines with arrows. And that's it. Okay, for number 3, y equals x squared plus 6. There's no values inside parentheses with the x for our x value, so we use 0. But they did give us a y value of 6. Now, something important to note is the sign does not change for your y value. It only changes for your x value. Our axis of symmetry is x equals 0. Since this is a squared problem, it's a parabola, which means it's a U shape, and our pattern is 1, 3, 5, 7. So I start at 0, 6. And I put a dot. Then I use my pattern to graph the rest. Over 1, up 1, over 1, up 2, 3, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3. So notice I could only use 1 and 3 of the pattern before I go off the graph. That is okay. You just want to do as many as you can. And we're done. For number 4, x plus 1 squared minus 2. So for our vertex, remember that x value, we use the opposite. So it's going to be negative 1, comma. Y value stays the same, so it's a negative 2. Axis of symmetry is x equals negative 1. I cannot stress enough, you need to make sure you have the x equals. It's squared, so it's a parabola, which means it's U-shaped, and it's a 1, 3, 5, 7 pattern. So I start at negative 1, negative 2. And I use my pattern over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, 2, 3, over 1, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on both sides. And then I draw my lines with arrows. We're done. Okay, number 5, y equals the absolute value of x. So now we have absolute values, no more squareds, which means this is an absolute value problem. It's V-shaped instead of U-shaped. Remember, our vertex doesn't change. We still find the vertex the same way. Since there's no value with the x and absolute values, that means our x value of our vertex is 0. There's no number after, which means our y value is also 0. Our axis of symmetry is x equals 0. This is a V shape because it's absolute value, and our pattern is 1, 1, 1, 1. So I start at 0, 0, and I go over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, and I'm going to continue the pattern. Once I finish on one side, I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. And I draw my lines with arrows, and we're done. For number 6, y equals the absolute value of x plus 4. So our vertex, remember we use the opposite for x, which means it's going to be a negative 4. There's no y value listed, so we use 0. For the axis of symmetry, it's x equals negative 4. It's an absolute value problem, which means it's a V shape, and our pattern is 1, 1, 1, 1. So I go to negative 4, 0, and put a dot. Now from here, I just use our pattern, 1, 1, 1, 1. I extended it as far as I could. I'm going to draw my lines with arrows, and I'm done. Number 7, vertex. X value is 0. Y value is negative 3. Axis of symmetry is x equals 0. This is still a V shape in a pattern of 1, 1, 1, 1. So I go to 0, negative 3, and I put a dot. And then I use the pattern 1, 1, 1, 1. So notice these are all very similar in the methods of how you solve them and graph them. And that's it. Last problem, number 8, y equals the absolute value of x minus 2 plus 7. So remember, for the vertex, the x value is the opposite. So instead of negative 2, I use a positive 2. Y value stays the same, so it's going to be a positive 7. My axis of symmetry is x equals 2. My shape is a V, and my pattern is 1, 1, 1, 1. So I go to 2, 7. And then I use my pattern of 1, 1, 1, 1. Draw my lines with arrows, and I'm done. And that's it for these notes.